Hello again. In this episode we complete the Ben Lawers Munros by climbing Meow Gray and Meow Garv, look at the history of human, animal and plant life on the Lawers Range, and round off our guide to Scottish Gaelic with the etymology or roots of the language. The Lawers Range is a large, high massif on the north shore of Loch Tay and the south side of the more remote Glen Lyon. It rises to over 1,200 metres and contains in Ben Lawers and Meow Garv two of the 5 highest Munros of the Southern Highlands. I've already climbed Glass, Lawers and Anshtuk a few times, and in part 1 we bagged Meow Cornic and Meow Courlay, which leaves us only Meow Gray and Meow Garv to climb to complete the range. The route begins in the hamlet of Lawers, halfway up Loch Tay and roughly equidistant to Kenmore and Killin on the North Shore Road, comprising little more than a few houses in relative proximity and the Ben Lawers Hotel. From here we ascend beside the Altnan Cat, past Mackim Farm and up through mixed forestry to the open hillside, then straight up Meow Gray's Big Nose, and final third to its summit and the main Lawers Ridge, which undulates its way to the high summit of Meow Garv. Hello again. Here we are at the Ben Lawers Hotel, pretty much halfway up Loch Tay. We're just going to walk along this little road here to Mackim Farm and head up there through those trees up to the hills beyond. As you can tell from the plentiful daffodils, spring has definitely sprung. It is feeling quite mild and, well, it will be windy on the top. It's like markedly milder even than 2 weeks ago. We'll just hear where the track turns up to Mackim Farm itself. We've got a telltale sign. Okay, I'm going to take a wild guess here and say that this is the path to the hill. Well, after a fairly steep ascent there from Mackim, we're now in this wood, and as you can see, the angle has become very leisurely, and this is really a very pleasant walk-in so far. Well, here we are making our way onto the open moorland, and the hillside there, Sron Vor behind us. That means Big Nose. And the path up here winds its way through the Sheelings, the ancient village of East Mellor. Okay, getting some height here. Behind us there you can see our second objective, Meow Garv, and Anshtuk poking menacingly over the top there. Big Nose there, and you can see the ridge runs along there to Meow Garv. We'll just pass the Sheelings there. Very faint path breaks off up here towards the Big Nose, and the main path goes down here, losing a significant bit of height, so we're not going to bother with that nonsense. We're going to head straight for this Big Nose. Now, one of the main things you'll notice about Lawers Range when you come here is the sheer scale of it in terms of the distances involved. Now, the Ben Lawers Ridge itself is technically only 8 miles long, but because the Ben Lawers Massif spans over 47 square miles, there's an awful lot more walking than that to a day out. Here we are up here, what looks like a nice wee crux section to get us started on the hills. Up here, the Big Nose. One more time. I'm telling you, mate. One more time.
Well, here we are approaching the top of the Big Nose, and it was fairly direct. Almost there. You can see the lovely Cordon and Cat arena behind me. There you are. Summit deigns to show itself, and hopefully that's not a false one. Fairly sure it isn't, because this isn't a very craggy or knobbly hill. What you see is what you get. Now I should point out that Anstück is considerably nicer to look at from this side than it is to climb. You can see how steep it is from that high Bialik. I haven't been down this end for about 12-13 years. There's a reason for that. The last time that I was here, up there on Anstück, unfortunately my climbing partner came a cropper on the descent there on ice and snow, very unpleasant 75-degree angle slopes, and he ended up with a sprained ankle and nasty lacerated back. This was in Whiteout, and it was about 4 o'clock in the evening. We had to basically hobble our way down from that high pass down to Loch Nan Cat there, down by the stream, and then to this, which is going to be our return route track along there, which in driving snow and in the dark wasn't the easiest experience. We eventually managed to make our way down to the road further down there, much further down there, where we were very lucky. A kind driver picked us up and took us back to our tent and our car. Now, the moral of the story is, if you think you're smart going up in the winter without crampons, as I did, I can assure you, you are not. Buy crampons, learn how to use them, and let them keep you safe, comfortable, and most importantly, alive. Looking down there at the northeast end of Loch Tay, Kenmore. Again, could be in the Lake District. And that's not a disparagement. Lake District is beautiful. So is this. Miel Gray, living up to its name. You can see some quite nice sunshine over there in the unfortunately named wide valley Appin of Dull. Well, as you can see, we're back to full Scottish weather. Damn. However, I ain't no quitter, and the summit lies just up there somewhere, I presume. Now you're probably thinking, God, that looks a bit chilly up there. Why is he just wearing a t-shirt? Is he not freezing? Not really. Not been too bad at all. And hopefully, we're not far off the top now. What's this appearing through the mist? Dash Summit. Miel Gray, number 41. It is done. And now for an epic summit panorama. Now as we've come down a little bit, you can see the mist slightly lifting, but I'm not holding out too much hope for much visibility for the rest of the walk, which is a pain in the arse for a visual medium, really, isn't it? Dum, da, dum, da, dum. Yep, we are between Miel Gray and Miel Garv, somewhere. There's some nasty bogs here where you can tell it's all meltwater from the snow. But hey, a hop, skip and a jump will get you over them. There's this fence here which we seem to be following along here, which is handy. Almost said in case of poor visibility there, but kind of the case right now, isn't it? Well, when you reach this stone, you're about midway between the two peaks. Miel Gray is behind us, and well, they're all a bit Miel Gray today, really, aren't they? Miel Garv, final descent to the Bialik, and then the reascent begins up there. Well, finally, the clouds are lifting a bit. You can see Miel Garv beginning to appear from the mist there. So starting to see some hills up north. Over there you can see the towering Carn Gorm of Glen Lyon, and we'll be visiting that soon. There to Miel Garv. Anstuk, and Ben Lors still wreathed in cloud.
As we've seen in the last 2 episodes, Gaelic is a complex and enigmatic language. In this final section of our crash course, we look at its etymology, or to be more accurate, the toponymy, or the study of the origin of place names of the Munros. Mountain names are more than mere taxonomy. They represent a lost heritage of how people saw and regarded the hills in ages past. Every Scottish hill and mountain name is formed from one of 4 languages: Cumbric, Norse, Scots, or Gaelic. Gaelic is evidently the most important language for hill words in the Scottish Highlands, as nearly every hill north of Stirling has a Gaelic name. Scots is a derivative hybrid of Anglo-Saxon, Norse and Gaelic. Words like law, fell and bin predominantly spoken in the northeast and central lowlands. Cumbric, or Brittonic, is an ancient Welsh language used in the borders and southern lowlands. This is the oldest known language used for Scottish hill names and died out around the 12th century. Ochil, the name of a range of hills near Stirling, has a Cumbric origin. Old Norse, the tongue of the fearsome Viking invaders, was widely used on the islands, Orkney, Shetland and the Hebrides, between the 9th and 12th centuries, mainly because these were Viking-occupied territory. On the mainland, the Norse influence is found only in Caithness and Sutherland, although it's highly likely the generalised skur or skor, ubiquitous on Skye, is also of Norse origin. As we touched upon in the pronunciation section, Scottish Gaelic derives from Irish Gaelic, and while many words are identical, they have very different meanings. For example, the Scottish Gaelic Unnach, high ridge, means a gathering in its Irish form. Gaelic hill names are abnormally numerous, comprising a very large selection of shapes, sizes, colours, body parts, people, creatures and plants. Also, many hills would have distinct names according to the glen or locale from which they were observed. All Gaelic hill names would originally have had a definite article, the, which became redundant over time, though many still have it, such as Anstuk. Naturally, Gaelic names have become changed or corrupted by the passage of time. As Gaelic is primarily a spoken rather than a written language, the names were passed on orally rather than written down. Timothy Pont, a native Scots speaker, went to great lengths in the 1590s to record the original Gaelic hill names as much as possible for his pioneering maps. Given Gaelic dictionaries did not yet exist, he recorded the names that he heard phonetically, as it turned out quite accurately, long before their formal codification on Ordnance Survey maps. This is especially so in the Southeast Highlands, where Gaelic was long dead by the time of the OS mappers, who were there in time to record the Gaelic names of the hills, but sadly too late to capture the tales and memories behind them. These were swept away in the moral abomination known as the Highland Clearances. Generally speaking, the names of the larger hills, Ben Nevis, Ben Lors, Ben Alder, are open to several interpretations, while lower hills are often easily and directly translated. This is because the largest and most prominent hills, being large and prominent, were named first, and by first I mean hundreds of years before the lesser peaks, when Gaelic was far more regionally fragmented. The lower hills were named much more recently in comparative terms, once Scottish Gaelic had coalesced into a single language. Generic hill words are common in other languages, for example the French mont or aiguille, the German berg or flue, but in Scottish Gaelic there are over 70. When the an extension is added as a diminutive, for example Maelin, small hill, this number rises to near a frankly ridiculous 100. The generic ben or ven is most common on the west coast and the southern Highlands. Ben Lomond, Ben Vui in Argyll and the Arrochar Alps are all bens, even the cobbler Ben Arthur. Elsewhere, it usually only appears to denote the highest hill or hills of an area, and this is why Ben Nevis is surrounded not by other bens, but by Unnachs, cairns, stoves, and muirchs. A ben is the anglicised version of ben. On maps, around 250 of the Scottish bens are anglicised, which is a surprisingly large proportion. Meow tends to have a really bad rep, most often associated with dull, boggy slogs of vast, formless mounds of mud and turf. However, its literal meaning is hill among mountains, i.e. a peak smaller in height than those surrounding it, rather than its common and unflattering translations of knob, or as one particularly dismissive writer from Skye would have it, heaps or almost shapeless lumps. In reality, there are many meows, such as those we're visiting today, that are not rounded or at all dull. Indeed, as we'll see shortly, Meow Gareth Summit is one of the most interesting we've visited thus far. I hope you've found this very limited guide to Scottish Gaelic useful. Over the rest of the series, we'll continue to delve into the eccentricities and history of the language as we go along, and just to warn you, the further north you go, the harder the names get.
We're just making our way up Meow Gareth here, and you can see behind me there over to Meow Gray, and you can see it's a fairly winding and knobbly descent from there to here. Unlike, for example, Benhisgarnick though, the path is pretty obvious and you'd have to be kind of not looking where you're going to get lost, really. Well, making our way gradually up to the summit ridge here of Meow Gareth. The mighty Ben Lors there finally revealing itself. This is without doubt its most aesthetically pleasing side, which always made a bit of a mockery of the supposed Ben Lors visitor centre around the other side, because you can't see it you can't see the best part of it, and a wonderful little sanctuary like Loch Nancat there as well. There to Ben Chonsey, you can see why it gets called possibly the most boring Munro. Over there you can see a beautiful view over there into Blair Athol, and as I say, the Tarf and Tilt Hills, the Ben Aglow Ridge, really fantastic visibility out east here. Looking over there, fantastic panorama of the entire Glen Lyon Horseshoe. Carngorm there. Meow Gareth. No, not this one. It's the same name as the one that we're climbing, because that's not confusing at all. So there you go. A perfect illustration of the difference that visibility makes to your day out in the hills. Lors itself and our summit still appear to be pretty clear, and going to stay that way, hopefully for the rest of the evening. So last lap, let's get up there. Here we are on the east shoulder, and the summit ridge is really not very far away at all now. Well, here we are, emerging upon the summit ridge. Man, if only all summits were like this, huh? This is a lot of fun, really interesting terrain, lovely views, really loving this eastwards vista. When I was up here back in the days, the visibility was shit, and when I was over at Schiehallion, yeah, it was white out again over there, so I didn't really get any of these views of the east of the Southern Highlands. So yeah, it's really nice. Now, so tall is Ben Lors that the tops of these mountains actually escaped the glaciers of the last ice age. Therefore, you get some interesting geology, and indeed some nice flora and fauna. In case you weren't aware, Ben Lors is a nature reserve. The range is home to some rare alpine flowers that you don't really find outside of the Alps. So not only do these Munros look spectacular, they're also a rich treasure trove of natural history.
Life has thrived on the Ben Lors range for thousands of years. In its glens and on the slopes above Loch Tay, you'll find a plethora of sheilings, including whole villages such as the Old Lors village and East Mellor on our route today. These were 17th and 18th century summer dwellings for those tending cattle high on the hills. There is also archaeological evidence in the area for human habitation dating back to nearly the last ice age. The oldest of these is an Iron Age campsite, 600 metres up in Kuroda, that dates back a staggering 9,000 years. The reserve is home to a host of wildlife, including red deer, ptarmigan, redpoll, ravens, ringowls, skylarks, and black grouse. However, it's the range's botanical life forms for which it is most famed. The rare mixture of lime-rich underlying rocks, high altitude, and microclimate combine to make Ben Lors a haven for a huge diversity of plants. The lush vegetation of the lower slopes gives way to rare Arctic alpine plants, for example alpine saxifrage and gentians, clinging to life high on the mountains, as well as, for those who like their moss, over 500 different types of lichen.
Base camp, come in base camp. Approaching the summit snowfield over. Well, it looks pretty dangerous, right? I don't know if I should go up unaided. I need to use protection. Maybe some ice screws, eh? What's that? Stop being so bloody daft and get to the top of the mountain. Right, okay. Here we are at the nexus of the ridges here. So this is the ridge we've come up here. There's another kind of intermediate ridge that runs down here. And this is the main north ridge that, as I say, runs down there to Invervar. And over there, Lochen Dam, Maelvuri, you can get a nice view of it this time. And Stukenlochen. Well, I think it's fair to say the views have opened up, huh? Wow. As I say, if all summits were like this, we'd be laughing. This is pretty much us. This would appear to be the highest point that I can see. So, yeah, that's us. Made it. We've made our way back down the way we came up, taking a sharp detour at the bottom of the Bialik, heading down here beside this deer fence, back down to the dam, from where the very long and winding and long track back towards Killin begins. So, all's well that ends well. Might have taken me best part of 13 years, but hey, the demons are exorcised, The lures are broken. Hey! Well, here we are on the road again, and significantly more relaxed circumstances than the last time I walked this track. So begins the start of a very long walk back, which I won't bore you with. Thanks again for watching. This has been Breaking the Lures. I hope you'll join me on my next day out in the hills. Till then, enjoy your adventures.